Let's get Maokwe, my colleague in Abuja, in. She has a couple of questions for you.
Okay.
Maokwe.
Well, we definitely hope to keep tabs on what is happening in the state. I think we've only seen Kaduna State so far present its own budget to the State House of Assembly. But looking at the fact that the federal government has presented its own now, perhaps you should see a number of states following suit.
Yeah.
That said, would you say that this budget is big enough? We've seen increasingly that the figures look like they're getting bigger, but there's still the question of whether or not the cake that is being baked is big enough for the country.
Well, in terms of big enough, I think it's always good to look at things from kind of like a base point. And I think the base point would be, for instance, the United States dollar. So, for instance, if the Nigerian budget in 2014 was about 4 or so trillion, thereabout, right, with an exchange rate of 160, 170, right? We're talking of a devaluation of twice that. So if you look at it in real terms, I think we're still in 2014. So I don't think it's gone higher, really, in real terms. It's just gone higher in inflation and devaluation terms.
There was also that controversy, I don't know if you listened to our first guest, about the convergence of the dollar, what we're seeing on the parallel market, and also the official window. But we see the federal government pegging this at 305 naira. He believes that the federal government should be looking closer to the window, the unofficial rates of 360 naira to the dollar. Do you think that that will be wise to go, to devalue the naira sort of?
Yeah. Well, I think the CBN governor has made some comments to that effect, in the sense that he said that he would want the exchange rate to organically, find its level, right? Of course, well, they're saying that, physically, but I think by this budget, they seem to be saying the opposite. For me, I think it is very clear, right? Benchmarking it at 305 is utterly unrealistic. That is not the rate of the naira. I don't think even the federal government would be getting USD at that rate. So I think it is pretty unrealistic, and I think it's time that they gradually try to move away from that.
What will be the implications of that?
Well, what it would be is, I think there is understandably some, maybe I would use the word fear of going into something that you're not so sure of. But I think the alternative window has shown us clearly, right, why we have to move in that direction. And for me, the impact would be simple enough. What would happen is that, first of all, the government would be able to attract higher naira receipts. But more importantly, it would be able to attract foreign direct investment, which is what we need. So instead of borrowing, for instance, like I was talking about the issue of power and infrastructure, for instance, if you have an exchange rate that is competitive and whatever, you have the likes of some of the largest asset management firms in the world who are looking to invest in infrastructure. We have an infrastructure deficit, so we are a very good candidate for that. Meanwhile, we have a lot of investment banking companies in Nigeria who can do and partner with some of these companies, so it would deepen the market. So I think in the end, it is positive for that to happen. We even saw that in agriculture. As the naira devalued last year, what happened? Exports rose in agriculture. So it shows you that Nigerians have the capacity to move up and step up to the game. I think the government should relax a little and let's see how we can get that thing a bit more realistic.
What are some of your concerns about the budget? I mean, you've said that it is, some people think it is okay, the projections look a little conservative, but you say it is optimistic. What are your concerns on this particular budget?
Okay, I think two key things for me. It seems to be conservative in terms of the oil benchmark. I think I like that. I think that's wise. But in terms of, for instance, the number of barrels that we're producing a day at 2.3 million, I think that's a bit optimistic, especially with the drums that we're hearing now. Then in terms of debt servicing, I mean, it's astronomical, right? Nigeria is borrowing so much more, and we are having to spend so much more to repay that debt. So the issue is not really about debt to GDP. It's more about, you know, the interest expense to the revenue that we're earning, you know. And then I think a lot of the revenues, like for instance, almost 500 billion, over 500 billion from, they say, from recovered loot. For instance, you know, as an accountant, I mean, somebody would have to be a bit, you know, you have to be cautious before you make a statement like that. Because, for instance, there are legal issues with regards to forfeiture of money, you know. So I think that is pretty optimistic. 500 billion, for instance, you're going to use to fund part of the budget. You know, how are we sure that's going to be happening?
When we return from this break, please stay with us.
Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. Lenin Ugoji is still with us, Director, Nigerian Stockbrokers Limited. You know, the President, in his presentation of the budget to the National Assembly, did mention that this government will ensure that taxable Nigerians live up to their obligations. The question now is, how much of taxation do you think will come to bear in ensuring the success of this budget?
Okay, well, I think it's absolutely critical. Absolutely critical, because, for instance, if you look at non-oil revenue is almost twice the oil revenue projections in the budget. So that is a full, clear departure from the past. Yes, in the last 3-4 years, those figures have kind of been converging, right? But I think this year is a clear departure from what has been happening in Nigeria before, and a fundamental part of that is expected to come from taxation. You know, more than 60% of that is meant to come from taxation. So I think it's a sounding bell, really, to the citizenry, to corporate Nigeria, to all forms of people that want to invest and you know, play in the country. I think the President is making it loud and clear that you have to pay your taxes. Yeah. And we know that he can be a tough guy, so for him to say that, I think it's very clear. People should start to meet their obligations, you know, in terms of taxation. And I think it is, because it's at 6%, right, taxation revenue per capita. It is exceedingly low, right? And it shows that we do have quite such a lot of opportunity in that regard. I think the main thing is really also about the issue of confidence in government utilizing people's taxable revenues to deliver on the infrastructural goals.
Lenin Ugoji, Director, Nigerian Stockbrokers Limited.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us on this very important 2018 budget release. Many thanks indeed.
Thank you.
Sunrise Daily will be back after these messages. Stay with us.